Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you've chosen to spend this time here, seeking a moment of peace. Whether you've been part of this quiet community for a while, or this is your first night joining our watch, welcome. My name is David, and this is a place for rest. So many of you have shared that it's the slow, predictable stories, the ones about tending a garden, sorting a library, or watching a quiet street, that help your minds finally settle. You've told me that in comments, and I read every one. It's your feedback that shapes this channel. So tonight, by popular request, we embark on our longest, most deliberate journey yet. For the next 3 hours, we will be the keepers of a lonely, beautiful light. We are miles from anywhere, on a rocky promontory, where the only sounds are the waves and the wind. There is no drama here. No storm is coming. Our only duty is to the rhythm of the place itself. The polishing of brass, the winding of gears, the careful entries in a worn leather logbook. This story is a sanctuary. It's designed to give your busy mind a single, simple, and safe place to rest. The circular walkway of a lighthouse, the glow of a lantern room, the methodical nature of a day where nothing happens. And that is precisely the point. If this is the kind of space that helps you, I invite you to make this a regular part of your routine. Consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. It's the best way to know when we've lit the lamp for a new story, creating another haven for when you need it most. Your subscription also tells the algorithm that this kind of calm, slow-paced content is valuable and helps others in search of rest find their way to our shore. But for now, let all of that go. There is no need to think about anything beyond the sound of my voice, and the images will gently paint together. So, let's begin. Make yourself truly comfortable. Let the weight of the day sink away from you. Feel the imaginary chill of the sea air and the solid, steadfast stone beneath us. We are here. We are safe. We are safe. The sea is calm. Love. Our watch begins, as it always does, with the logbook. The 4th of October. Wind, negligible. Alpha, sea state, calm. Swell, low, from the southwest. The barometer holds steady. Visibility is exceptional. The night is clear, and all is in order. The ink from that final entry, made just before dawn, is dry now. The leather cover of the logbook closes with a soft, padded thump. That was the night's final duty. Now, the day's first duty begins. It is not marked by an alarm, but by a subtle change in the quality of the darkness. Outside the thick, salt-speckled panes of the lantern room, the profound, ink-black night softens to a deep, velvety indigo at the very edge of the world, where the sea meets the sky. This is the signal, the great lamp, having spun its reliable path all night, painting the seascape with its long, sweeping brush of light, can now be allowed to rest. The mechanism's steady, rhythmic click-clack. Click-clack has been the heartbeat of the tower for 12 hours. It is time to still that heart for a while. The keeper's hand, familiar and sure, reaches for the brass lever on the clockwork assembly. It is cool to the touch, its surface worn smooth in that one spot. By generations of identical gestures, there is a gentle, solid thunk as the gear train disengages. The clicking ceases. The sudden silence in the lantern room is profound, a tangible presence. It is not an empty silence, but a full one, now filled by the distant, sighing breath of the sea far below. The great Fresnel lens, A complex jewel of prisms and glass barrels slows its rotation and comes to a halt. Its central lamp, a bright, fierce point of contained flame, still glows within the intricate cage of glass. Now comes a moment of pure ritual. A small polished copper door on the side of the lamp housing is unlatched. A slight hiss of escaping heat whispers into the room. The keeper's hand, shielded by a simple cloth of soft, undyed wool, reaches in and carefully turns the valve key. The hiss diminishes, then fades. The brilliant white flame shrinks, becomes a blue ghost, a dancing spirit, and then winks out. A faint, acrid sweet scent of spent paraffin oil lingers. A smell as familiar as salt. The lens, now dormant, is still warm. Heat radiates from its glass surfaces, causing the cool morning air to shimmer slightly around it. This residual warmth is a comfort. For a long moment, the keeper simply stands there, one hand resting lightly on the warm brass rail that encircles the lens. The view from this high glass cage is transforming. That indigo band on the horizon is widening, leaching the darkness from the sky, turning it to a wash of deep violet, then heather gray. The sea, which had been a featureless void, begins to show texture. Long, languid rollers moving with a silent, immense patience. They are not yet waves, just the sea's deep, sleeping breath. It is time to descend. The iron staircase, a spiral corkscrew bolted to the curved stone wall. Await. Each step is known, each handrail's curve anticipated. The descent is a meditation. Boots, soft-soled and worn, make a quiet, scuffing thump on each perforated iron tread. Thump. Dirtwally, whereas, pause. Thump, paitu, pause. Milteo, oh. The sound echoes slightly in the stone cylinder of the tower's core, through the narrow slit windows placed at each landing. The growing light offers framed, progressive views. A glimpse of the rocky causeway, a slice of the boathouse slate roof, the sprawling, gray expanse of ocean. At the base of the tower is the main room, the living heart of the light. It is a circular space, lined with bookshelves stuffed with weather-worn volumes and cabinets of polished oak. A sturdy table sits in the center, with a very logbook upon it. In one corner, a compact galley kitchen holds a cold iron stove. The room smells of old paper, of beeswax polish, of the faint, damp, mineral scent of stone. The first practical task is to light the stove. It is a small, cast iron potbelly, its surface mottled with a lifetime of heat. The kindling is dry and splintery, kept in a brass-bound box. The snap of each small piece as it's arranged in the firebox is a sharp, domestic sound. A single match, struck against the stove's side, flares with a sulfuric pop and a brief, warm light that dances on the curved walls. The kindling catches, tiny flames licking up, eager and yellow. A single, larger log of dense, slow-burning oak is placed atop the tepi of fire. It will take time to catch, to begin radiating proper heat. That's all right. There is nothing but time. The next sound is the filling of the kettle. It is an old, copper-bottomed kettle, its surface dented and darkened. Water from the cistern, cool and tasting faintly of the slate roof it was collected from, gurgles as it pours from the jug. The kettle is heavy with its full weight. It is placed on the stove's flat top, just off to the side of the growing fire. The metal ticks softly as it begins to absorb the heat. Breakfast is a simple, silent affair. A bowl of coarse-cut oatmeal measured from a stoneware jar, a pinch of salt, water from the kettle, now steaming, is stirred in. It thickens slowly. A spoonful of dark treacle from a tin is drizzled over the top, creating swirling, amber patterns that slowly sink into the porridge. The spoon is pewter, cool and heavy. The taste is wholesome, plain, comforting. The only sounds are the soft scrape of spoon on bowl, the crackle of the fire now established in the stove, and the low, constant mantra of the sea, a bass note beneath everything. After the bowl is washed and dried, placed back on its shelf, the day's true maintenance begins. A canvas satchel is prepared. In it goes a roll of soft, lint-free cloth, a bottle of specially distilled vinegar with a faint, clean smell, a tin of fine white polishing compound, a selection of small precise brass tools wrapped in felt, a fresh bottle of paraffin oil, its glass smooth and cool. This is the ascent kit. The climb back up the spiral stairs feels different in the morning light. The slit windows now cast long, sharp rectangles of pale gold onto the opposite wall, illuminating the dust motes that spiral slowly in the still air. Back in the lantern room, the world has been unveiled. The sky is now a high, pale shell of dove-gray cloud, stretched taut. The sea is a vast, undulating plain of hammered lead, streaked with silvery paths where the weak sun finds a gap. The horizon is a razor-straight line, dividing two immensities of gray. The first task is the lamp itself. The glass chimney, still warm from the night's burn, is carefully lifted from its housing. It is held up to the daylight. The glass is pristine, clear, but a faint, ghostly haze of carbon has settled on its inner surface. This is the enemy of light. With a soft cloth dampened with the distilled vinegar, the keeper begins to wipe. The motion is circular, unhurried, covering every square inch of the interior surface. The cloth comes away with a slight gray smut. The glass, when held up again, is perfectly optically clear. It catches the gray sky and bends it, a cool, curved window. It is set aside on a padded rest. Next, the wick. It is a broad, flat ribbon of specially woven cotton. The night's burn has left its edge charred and uneven. With a small, sharp pair of brass scissors, the keeper trims away the blackened fringe. Each snip is a soft, crisp click. The new edge is straight, white, perfect. The wick mechanism is oiled with a single drop from a tiny brass canister, applied with a needle-thin spout. The mechanism turns with a smooth, silent ease. The reservoir for the paraffin oil is checked. The gauge, a simple glass tube marked with a single line, shows a level just below half. The fresh bottle is uncorked. The smell of clean paraffin, sharp and petroleum clean, fills the space. The oil glugs quietly as it pours into the brass filler hole, a slow, golden stream. The gauge level climbs, settles just above the line. Perfect. Now, the lens. This is the cathedral. The Fresnel lens is a masterpiece of engineering, designed to capture the tiny flame's light and magnify it, bend it, throw it miles out to sea. It is comprised of dozens of individual glass prisms and bullseye panels set into a complex brass frame. Each piece of glass must be flawless. The keeper begins at the topmost ring of prisms. Polishing cloth is dry, treated with a minute amount of the white compound. Each prism is a thick, heavy chunk of optically perfect glass, its facets cut with geometric precision. The cloth moves over one facet in slow, deliberate circles. The compound, a gentle abrasive, removes any microscopic film of salt, any smudge of oil from the air. As the cloth passes, the glass transforms. It goes from being merely clear to having a deep, liquid clarity. It drinks the gray light from the sky and holds it, cool and still, prism by prism, bullseye by bullseye. The keeper work. The rhythm is slow, methodical. There is no rush. The only sound is the soft whispering rub of cloth on glass, a sound like a gentle exhalation. Sometimes a prism will catch the light just so, and throw a tiny, brilliant rainbow onto the opposite wall. A fleeting, secret jewel. The brass framework that holds this glass jewel box is next. It is a skeleton of sturdy, curved bars and delicate filigree. A different cloth, one dampened with a drop of lemon oil, is used here. The brass, under a lifetime of care, has a deep, mellow glow, not a shine. The cloth follows the curves, finding the intricate joints, the rivets, the tiny screws. The lemon oil cleans and nourishes, leaving a faint citrus and metal scent. The clockwork mechanism that rotates the lens is a world of its own. Behind a protective panel, a universe of gears, weights, and chains reside. This is wound once per day. The keeper inserts a heavy wrought iron key into its socket. The key is cold, its teeth perfectly engaging the hidden gears. The turning begins. It's hard work. That's all. The mechanism is designed to be weight-driven, to have a significant resistance. The key turns with a solid ratcheting clunk. Clunk, clunk. Each clunk represents a minute of future rotation, a segment of the night's faithful sweep. The keeper turns it 30 times, 40, 50. The muscles in the arm and shoulder warm with the effort. A soft sheen of sweat appears on the brow. Finally, the tension is set. The mainspring, or the weight, is fully wound. It will now slowly, inexorably unspool over the next 24 hours, driving the perfect, predictable rotation of the light. The keeper listens. From within the mechanism comes a new sound. A deep, contented tick. Talk, slower and more resonant than the previous clicking. It is the sound of potential energy, of time captured and stored. The work in the lantern room is done. Everything is clean, fueled, wound, and waiting. The copper door is closed but unlatched, ready for tonight's lighting. The polished glass and brass seem to gather the diffused daylight and softly glow from within. The descent is made once more. But the morning, now fully arrived, offers the outdoor round. The keeper dons a thick woolen coat, weathered to a soft gray-green by salt and sun. The wooden door to the outside is heavy, bound with iron. It opens with a groan of hinges and a rush of cool, damp, moving air. The sound of the sea is immediate and encompassing. It is no longer a bass note through stone, but a full symphony. The deep, hollow boom as a roller meets the cliff base far below, the hissing retreat of water through 1,000 fissures in the rock. The high, lonely path from the tower door is paved with worn, uneven flagstones, slick with perpetual damp. It leads first to the weather station. This is a small, open platform with instruments mounted on a white-painted post. The anemometers, 3 cups are still, not a twitch. The wind vane, a simple arrow, points resolutely south-southwest, as it has for days. The keeper taps the barometer's glass face. The needle rests on fair, unwavering. The thermometer reads 9 degrees Celsius. All is noted mentally, to be recorded later. The rain gauge is a simple copper funnel and cylinder. It is empty, save for a few drops of condensation. It is tipped out, the few drops sparkling as they fall onto the lichen-covered rock. Next is the inspection of the tower's exterior. The keeper walks a slow circle around the base of the massive whitewashed cylinder. The paint is thick, layered over decades. It is checked for cracks, for blisters, for any sign of the relentless salt spray eating its way in. A single hairline crack is noted near ground level. It will need a touch of paint before winter. A mental note is made. The boathouse, a low stone shed dug into the lee of the cliff, is visited. Its doors warped by moisture, but opens with a shoulder's nudge. Inside, the air is still and smells of tar, old rope, and damp wood. The small dinghy, upside down on trestles, is fine. Its oars are secure on the wall. A coil of rope is checked for dry rot, its length run through knowing hand. Everything is in order. The final outdoor task is the most mundane. Checking the vegetable patch. It is a small, walled plot of earth, sheltered from the worst of the gales by a low, curved dry stone wall. Here, stubborn things grow. A few rows of potatoes, their leaves dark green and leathery. Some heads of cabbage, tight and frost-hardy. A patch of herbs, rosemary, thyme, sage, their scents released by the brush of the coat against them. The soil is damp. No watering is needed. A few yellowing leaves are pinched from the cabbage plants and dropped into a small bucket for the compost pile. The round is complete. Back inside, the heavy door closes, muting the sea's voice to a murmur once more. The stove is giving off a gentle, radiant heat. The main room is cozy. It is now time for the logbook's midday entry. The book is opened to the next clean, lined page. The pen, a sturdy dip pen with a steel nib, is selected from its holder. The inkwell is opened. The nib is dipped, the excess ink tapped gently against the well's rim, then hovers over the page. 11:45 a.m. Morning maintenance complete. Lamp chimney cleaned. Wick trimmed. Reservoir filled to 3/4. Lens and brass polished. Clockwork wound. Exterior rounds made. All fixtures secure. Weather remains settled. Barometer steady. No vessels sighted. Ink flows. A steady blue-black stream, forming the familiar, slightly angled cursive. The entry is a masterpiece of nothing happening. It is perfect. The pen is wiped clean, set aside. The ink is allowed to dry. The afternoon stretches ahead. A long, quiet expanse. A book is selected from the shelf, a heavy, dense volume on marine navigation, filled with star charts and tables of tidal coefficients. It is not read for plot, but for texture. The keeper sits in the worn leather chair by the stove, the book open on the lap. The eyes move over the complex diagrams of celestial fixes, the lists of declination, the intricate sketches of sextants. The words are absorbed, but not retained. They are a gentle exercise for the mind, a stream of complex, meaningless data that washes over the consciousness without sticking. Occasionally, a glance is made out of the small, deep-set window. The view is a fixed painting. Sea, sky, the ragged line of a distant headland to the north. The clouds shift slowly. A patch of slightly lighter gray moves across the dome of the sky. The sea's pattern of rollers remains constant. A single gull passes, a white scratch against the gray, its cry swallowed by the glass. Time passes not in minutes, but in the gradual cooling of the tea in the mug beside the chair, in the slow settling of the fire in the stove to a bed of glowing embers, in the imperceptible movement of the light across the stone floor. The book is closed. Its weight is comfortable. A stretch is taken, muscles easing. The next small task presents itself. Mending a sock. A wicker basket holds such things. The sock is gray wool, worn thin at the heel. A darning mushroom, a smooth wooden dome, is slipped inside. A needle, threaded with yarn of a nearly identical gray, is picked up. The rhythm of darning is different from polishing. It is a push and pull, an in and out, a weaving of new material into old. The needle flashes in the light from the window, a tiny silver fish, diving in and out of a gray wool sea. The resulting mend will be a small, neat patch of cross-hatched yarn, stronger than the original fabric. It is satisfying in its utility, in its quiet reclamation of something worn. As the afternoon deepens, the light in the room changes. Pale gold rectangles from the high windows lengthen, stretch, become thinner and more orange. The keeper rises and prepares a simple meal. A potato from the store, scrubbed clean, its skin earthy. It is placed directly in the embers of the stove to bake. The smell that eventually rises is humble and profound. The scent of hot earth, of simple sustenance. When it is done, it is fished out with tongs, rolled onto a plate. It is split open, its interior fluffy and steaming. A knob of salted butter is placed in its center, melting into a yellow pool. A sprinkle of chopped chives from the herb patch, green and sharp, that while eaten slowly with a spoon. It is a feast of warmth and silence. After the plate is cleaned, the evening ascent begins. This climb is different from the mornings. It is a transition into the night watch. The light in the tower stairwell is now amber, fading to blue. The lantern room, when entered, is a chamber of gathering shadows. The great lens sits dark and silent, a complex crystal waiting its spark. The sky outside is turning again. The uniform gray has broken. In the west, a narrow band of clear sky has opened just above the horizon, a strip of watery lemon yellow. The sea beneath it is no longer lead, but a deep, luminous slate blue. The first star appears, not in a clear band, but high overhead in the east, a single, pure, unwavering point of white. Vespa. The evening star. Light. It is time. The ritual is the reverse of the mornings. The fresh wick is adjusted to the perfect height. The clean chimney is placed over it, its fit secure. The copper door is closed, but not latched. The keeper takes a long wooden match from a box. The match is struck against a rough strip on the lamp housing. A scratch, a flare, a small dancing sphere of orange light that casts huge, leaping shadows in the glass chamber. The match is brought to the wick. For a second, nothing. Then, a tiny, hungry tongue of flame licks up, catches, steadies. It is a small, yellow, domestic flame. The valve is adjusted. The flame grows, becomes a steady, upright teardrop of pure white light. It is fierce and bright now, but contained by the glass chimney. Its light fills the lantern room, bouncing off the countless prisms of the dormant lens, throwing complex, shifting geometric patterns onto the walls and ceiling. Now, the final act. Deeper steps to the clockwork mechanism. The brass lever, cool once more, is engaged. There is the same solid thunk, and then the heartbeat returns. Click-clack, click-clack, click-clack. The lens shudders, then begins to turn. Slowly, majestically, it rotates on its perfectly balanced carriage. As it turns, the magic happens. The small, fierce flame is captured by the first bullseye panel. The thick, convex glass seizes the light, bends it, focuses it into a solid, concentrated beam. That beam, white as moonlight but alive with fire, shoots out through the glass wall of the lantern room, a blazing spear into the twilight. It travels across the darkening sea, a path of liquid light on the water. Then, as the lens continues its rotation, the beam moves. It sweeps the horizon. Click-clack. The beam passes over the distant headland. Click-clack. It flashes across the empty ocean. Click-clack. It touches the base of the clouds, making their undersides glow faintly for an instant. It is alive. The light is alive and working. Its purpose is fulfilled with every steady, mechanical turn. The keeper watches for one full rotation, ensuring the mechanism is smooth, the beam true and strong. It is. The beam cuts the gathering dark, a clean, reliable slash. It is a message to the empty sea. Here is land. Here is rock. One, there, clear. You are not alone. But the sea is empty. No ship answers the call. That is the usual, the expected. The keeper descends for the final time that day. The main room is now lit by a single low paraffin lamp on the table. Its soft, yellow glow, a tiny echo of the great eye above. The logbook is opened once more, then is dipped. The final entry of the day. Await. Outside, the night is fully arrived. The sea is a black presence, its sound deeper, more resonant. The beam from above sweeps past the window every 30 seconds, a brief, blinding flash of white light that floods the room for a heartbeat, then vanishes, leaving the afterimage dancing on the retina before the soft lamplight reclaims the space. Flash. Silence. The gentle glow. Flash. Silence. The gentle glow. It is the rhythm of the night. 1. The pen touches paper. 7:30 p.m. Lamp lit at civil twilight. Clockwork engaged. Beam visibility. Excellent. First watch commenced. All conditions unchanged. Then is set down. The day's work, such as it was, is done. The only duty now is to be present, to listen, to ensure the rhythmic click-clack above does not falter. The keeper moves to the deep-set window, standing in the darkness, away from the table's lamp. The view is of nothing and everything. The black sky, now dusted with more stars. The black sea, a void. And then, every 30 seconds, the world is born anew in a blast of white. The beam explodes out of the top of the window frame, painting the rocky causeway, the boathouse roof, the churning water at the cliff base in stark, monochrome detail. For that 1 second, everything exists in absolute clarity. Then it is gone, swallowed back into the warm, breathing dark. The keeper watches this cycle. Ambience meets about 10 times. Something might be what entire 20. The mind empties. Mother was sad. The clack above, the sigh of the sea below, the flash of the light. They become one thing, a single, slow, eternal pulse. There is no past, no future, only this rock, this light, this present, perpetual watch. The 4th of October is almost done. It has been a day of perfect, unbroken routine, a day where every action had a purpose. Every purpose was fulfilled, and nothing of note occurred. The wind was negligible. The sea was calm. The swell was low from the southwest. The barometer held steady. The night was clear. All, and all was, is, and will be in order. Being continues its rounds. What? Keeper stands by the window long after the final log entry, held by the rhythm more than any sense of duty. The flesh tires, but the ritual does not. The final round of the main room is performed. A check of locks already checked, a touch to the stove side to confirm its cooling. The paraffin lamp on the table is turned down, its flame shrinking to a tiny, steady blue pearl. The room subsides into a deeper gloom, patterned only by the sweeping flash from above. It is time to retire to the small, curved sleeping alcove set into the stone wall. But sleep in a lighthouse is never a full surrender. It is a lighter state, a dozing awareness that keeps one ear tuned to the steady click-clack, listening for the slightest hitch, the faintest change in tempo that would signal a trouble with the mechanism. The keeper lies in the narrow bunk, blankets pulled high. The flash from the lantern room penetrates even here, a faint recurring pulse of light that travels across the ceiling. A swift, silent comet that appears, streaks, and vanishes. It becomes the visual metronome for the night. The mind, lulled by the day's physical sameness, begins its own gentle, unstructured wandering. It does not dream of people or places, but of textures and tasks. The mind's hand polishes an endless prism. The mind's eye watches a barometer needle that never moves. There is a comfort in these thought echoes of the day. They are familiar paths that lead nowhere, demanding nothing. Some hours later, 2 or 3, time is measured in lamp rotations, not clock hands. A subtle change in the soundscape pulls the keeper from the doze. Not a hitch in the mechanism, but a new note from outside. The wind has risen. All? It is not a storm, nothing of concern. But the long negligible calm has ended. A low, soft moan now threads through the stonework. A faint whistle at the narrow window slit. The sea's sigh deepens to a murmur. Then a more insistent push and pull against the rocks. The keeper listens, identifies it, and categorizes it. A light breeze from the southeast. It will make the air in the lantern room cooler, but will not shake the glass. It is noted, and the half-sleep resumes, now accompanied by this new, soft song in the darkness. The gray light before dawn feels different this morning. It is a wind-whipped gray, fluid and fast-moving. When the keeper ascends to the lantern room for the morning extinguishing, the world outside is alive with motion. The sea is a turbulent, dark slate gray, capped with countless white flecks like a scattering of salt. The clouds race from the southeast, low and bruised. The ritual is the same, but the context has shifted. The great lamp has spent the night cutting through moving air, its beam perhaps trembling slightly in the turbulence. but it has held its watch. Disengaging the clockwork, the sudden silence is again profound, but now filled with the new voice of the wind, a humming pressure against the glass pane. The lamp is extinguished. The scent of paraffin is swept away by a fresh, cold, salty draft that finds its way through the smallest seam. The morning porridge tastes the same. The climb with the satchel feels the same, but the polishing today has a different companion. The wind's murmur is a constant presence, a white noise that blends with the soft rub of cloth on glass. The lens, when inspected, bears the faintest, most ephemeral film of salt spray, carried up the cliff face by the new breeze. It comes away easily under the cloth, leaving the glass with a squeak of perfect cleanliness. The wind is noted in the logbook's morning entry, given its due as a change, but not a disruption. Wind, light to moderate from the southeast. Sea state, slight to moderate. All apparatus functioning normally. The outdoor rounds have a new energy. The coat collar is turned up. The anemometer's cups spin with a gentle whirring persistence. Taileo, the wind vane has shifted. It points decisively southeast. The barometer's needle has trembled, just a fraction to the left of fair, not enough to denote change, but it has moved. This is noted with quiet interest. The crack in the tower's whitewash is checked, no worse. The vegetable patch is visited. The herbs dance on their stems. The cabbage leaves rustle against each other with a sound like stiff paper. Everything is secure, just animated. The afternoon is spent not with the navigation book, but with a more immediate text. The tide tables and a local weather journal kept by previous keeper. The keeper cross-references the falling barometer with entries from past years. There is a pattern, sometimes leading to a squall, sometimes to nothing. The activity is one of observation, not worry. It is a puzzle made of air pressure and wind direction. A slow game played against the sky. The darning is done, the sock mended. The baked potato is eaten, its warmth a contrast to the cool draft now sneaking under the door. As evening approaches, the wind settles, not back to negligible, but to a steady, light breath. The squall did not materialize. The barometer steadies. The day's minor excitement is over. The evening lighting is performed in a world that is once again familiar. Though the sea's surface still carries the memory of the breeze in a confused, choppy pattern, the lamp is lit, clockwork engaged. The beam, when it spears the dusk, seems even brighter against the swiftly moving, charcoal smudge clouds. The keeper stands at the window again, watching the new rhythm. The flash illuminates the now churning water in the cove, each time catching the waves in a different frozen pose. A cresting curl, a shattered spray, a rolling hump. It is the same light, the same tower, the same keeper. But the canvas it paints upon is newly dynamic. The log entry is almost identical to the previous night's, save for two words: wind, steady light sea. The days that follow are variations on this new theme. The southeast wind becomes a constant companion for a week. It is never fierce, but it is ever present, a breath that never stills. The keeper's routines adapt infinitesimally. An extra check of the lantern room's window seals. The stove is kept a little brighter to counteract the chill draft along the floor. The sound of the sea is a more vigorous shush and boom. The keeper becomes intimately acquainted with this new phase of the island's mood. It is not a disruption, but a deepening of the relationship with the place. One learns the different tones of the wind's moan around the lantern room gallery. One learns how the particular slant of rain, when it finally comes in a brief, mild shower, tracks across the western windows, and then, one morning, it is gone. The keeper wakes to a silence so deep it feels thick. The wind has died in the night. Ascending the stairs, the keeper finds the world has been wiped clean and stilled. The sea is a flat, burnished sheet of mercury, reflecting the slow pink clouds of a windless dawn perfectly. The silence is absolute. The extinguishing of the lamp, the polishing of the glass, all is done in this new, profound quiet. The only sound is the keeper's own breathing and the soft, internal sounds of work. The calm has returned, but it is different from before. It is not the negligible calm of a stagnant high pressure, but the deep, breathless calm after a passing has finished. The air feels rinsed. The log entry reads, "Wind, return to negligible. Sea like glass. Entity on my soul." A perfect stillness, and so the wheel turns. The keeper's life is not a story of events, but of these subtle seasonal shifts in the dialogue between rock, sea, and sky. A fortnight of stillness is broken by a day of soft, misting rain from the southwest, which requires meticulous drying of all tools to prevent rust and brings a damp, peat-scented chill to the stone. A week of high, bright skies and a northerly breeze makes the polishing almost unnecessary. The air so clear and dry, the glass seems to maintain its own clarity. Through all of it, the routine holds. The logbook fills with entries that are poems of sameness. Wick trimmed, brass polished, lens clear, tight clockwork wound. No vessels. The food is simple, repetitive, nourishing. The small repairs, a hinge oiled, a shelf bracket tightened, a new coat of whitewash mixed and applied to the hairline crack, are small victories of maintenance over entropy. The keeper's hands grow more familiar with the texture of every tool, every surface, than with any human hand. The longest night of the year approaches. The keeper can feel it in the early darkness that now swallows the afternoon lighting ritual whole. The lamp must be lit earlier, burns longer, into the pale morning. Gold settles into the stone, a deep stored chill that the stove fights a constant losing battle against. On this deep winter night, after lighting the lamp, the keeper does not immediately descend. Wrapped in the thickest coat, they step out onto the iron gallery that encircles the lantern room. The cold is a physical shock, clean and biting. The sky is a black vault, dusted with a million diamond chips. The Milky Way, a frozen river of light overhead. The lighthouse beam, sweeping through this crystalline air, seems to illuminate not just the sea, but the very atoms of the frosty night. It is breathtakingly beautiful, and utterly, terribly lonely. The vastness of the cosmos, the endless dark sea, the single defiant spear of light. The keeper is a tiny, warm pulse at the center of it all. There is no fear in this loneliness. It has been distilled into a pure, quiet fact of existence. The keeper breathes out, a plume of vapor snatched away by the beam's passage. After a few moments, a deep, unshakable calm settles in, colder and more solid than the stone of the tower. This is the purpose, not just to warn, but to be a point of consciousness in the void, to witness the magnificent indifference of the world. The keeper goes back inside, the warmth of the tower, a welcome embrace. The log entry for that night contains no poetry, only the fact, but the feeling of that star-filled void remains, a silent companion in the alcove for the rest of the long, long night. The seasons continue their slowdown. The winter gales come, true storms that shake the glass and make the tower hum like a monstrous tuning fork. The keeper rides them out, a diligent rider on a stone horse, listening to the fury, checking and rechecking the fastenings, the log entries speaking of severe gusts and tremendous seas, but always ending with light burning brightly, mechanism secure. And then the storms pass, leaving a wreckage of seaweed on the high rocks and a cleansed, sparkling world. One day, in what might be early spring, a vessel is sighted. It is not in distress. No, it is a small coastal steamer, well off on the horizon, a smudge of smoke and a dark shape. It passes in the afternoon light. The keeper watches it from the gallery for a long time, until it disappears behind the headland. It is the first sign of another human world in months. The event is so notable, it earns its own line in the log. A1430, coastal steamer on northward passage, hull down on horizon, topped out. Etat is all. Vani Savinia out. Its passing leaves no ripple in the routine. It is a reminder of a world that churns with activity and connection. A world that now feels as distant and theoretical as the constellations. While the keeper feels no pull towards it, only a mild anthropological curiosity. The tower, the rock, the rhythm. This is the real world. And so the logbook fills. One volume is completed, tied with its ribbon, and placed on a high shelf next to its predecessors. A new, identical book is opened. Only the first entry in the new book is the same as the first entry in the old. The work is eternal. The keeper's hands, now etched with lines of salt and tiny scars from tools, perform the rituals. The mind is clear, quiet, occupied with the immediate sensory world. The smell of the oil, the sound of the cloth, the pressure of the wind, the quality of the light. There is no past to mourn, no future to dread. There is only the endless, gracious present. The turning of the lens, the sweeping of the beam, the writing of the log, the watching of the sea. The wind may be negligible or from the southeast. The sea may be calm or moderate. The swell may be low from the southwest or from the northeast. The barometer may hold steady or fall slowly. The night may be clear or overcast. And through it all, in an unbroken line of care, stretching back through the keepers who wrote in the previous volumes, all is and will be in order. The new logbook's pages are slightly stiffer. The lines are more vivid blue. The ink from the first entry takes a moment longer to dry. This small novelty is noted, then absorbed into the continuum. The old volume on the shelf is not a monument to the past. It is simply a fuel log for a fire that continues to burn. The work is the same. A morning comes with a dense wet fog. It is a fog that swallows sound and sight. The keeper wakes to a world of opaque, swirling white. The familiar boom of the sea is muffled into a diffuse, directionless sigh. The climb to the lantern room is a journey into a cloud. The great beam, when checked, is a solid glowing cylinder in the mist for the first 10 feet. Then it dissolves, its light thrown back by the billions of suspended water droplets. It is working harder tonight, its light scattering, not penetrating. Dog bell, operated by a weighted clockwork mechanism in a small housing below the gallery, takes on a new importance. Its automated mournful clang echoes dully in the muffled world. Clang, clang, clang. The keeper listens to its rhythm, ensuring it hasn't become choked with moisture. Its sound is the truth now. The light is merely a suggestion. The day's work is a battle against damp. Every metal surface in the living quarters beads with condensation. A soft, dry cloth is taken to the tools in their case, to the hinges of the cupboards, to the brass fittings of the lamp on the table. A low fire is kept in the stove all day, not for heat, but to draw the wet from the air. The smell becomes one of wood smoke and wet wool. The log entry notes: fog, visibility less than 50 yards. Dull, bad functioning. Wick trimmed low to reduce smoke and stagnant air. The fog persists for 3 days. On the 3rd day, the world returns with a sudden, shocking clarity. The fog lifts not by thinning, but by being rolled back like a heavy curtain by a fresh norwesterly breeze. Suddenly, the sea is there again, a deep, vibrant blue, and the horizon is a line etched with a razor. The air tastes clean and washed. Every detail of the distant headland is sharp. The keeper breathes it in, the lungs feeling cleansed. The routine continues, but there is a lightness to the polishing, a crispness to the sound. The spring tides arrive, not with a storm, but with a silent, immense pull. The sea retreats farther than it has in months, exposing long, dark, muscle-crusted fingers of rock, usually submerged. The water in the cove becomes a clear, shallow pool over rippled sand. The keeper takes the rare opportunity during the low tide to descend a zigzag path to the very base of the cliff, to the tidal shelf. It is a different world down here, slick and smelling powerfully of salt, iodine, and decay. Barnacles crunch underfoot. Small, transparent shrimp dart in trapped pools. The keeper inspects the foundation stones of the tower where they meet the rock. They are solid, seamless, grown into the island's bones by time and weight. A few strands of heavy kelpy seaweed have wrapped around an iron mooring ring, set into the stone for the old, long-gone supply boat. Keeper untangles them, the cold, rubbery fronds heavy in hand, and tosses them back into the advancing shallows. It is not necessary work, but it feels correct. The tide is turning. The slow, inevitable creep of water begins its return. By the time the keeper climbs back up, the unique world below is already being reclaimed, drowned under the rising, benevolent blue. Back in the lantern room that evening, the view of the high tide is different. The sea feels closer, fuller, a great beast fed and content. The beam skims across a water line that has climbed several feet up the rocks, smoothing over the afternoon's exposed landscape as if it were a dream. Time passes in these gentle, natural pulses. The gulls become more active, their cries more frequent, carrying sticks and grass for nests on the inaccessible cliff. The keeper observes a pair of peregrine falcons that take up residence on a high ledge, their sharp silhouetted forms sometimes cutting across the circle of the sky. They are fellow residents, fellow watchers. Their presence is noted in the log not as an event, but as a seasonal marker. Peregrines seen hunting, nesting likely. One still afternoon, a pod of dolphins passes. They are far out, but their progress is clear. A series of dark, rolling arcs, a synchronized exhalation of breath that catches the sun in a momentary mist. They travel south, purposefully, a society moving as one through the vastness. The keeper watches them until they are specks, then gone. Their passage leaves a strange quiet echo in the air, a memory of effortless, communal life. It is beautiful, and its transience underscores the permanence of the rock. The log notes, pod of dolphins, approx. 20, moving south. The rhythm of the light is the one true constant. Its needs dictate the day. The oil must be ordered before the autumn storms. A letter is written in a careful hand on crisp paper, detailing the required gallon. It is placed in the waterproof pouch to be collected on the next rare visit from the tender vessel, which might not come for weeks. The ordering is an act of faith in a future that is identical to the present. The slow brightening days of late spring bring a new task: painting. The exterior woodwork, the door, the window frames, the gallery railing, needs its annual coat of brilliant white. The paint is thick and must be stirred for a long time, the paddle scraping against the bottom of the tin with a sticky, slopping sound. The smell is sharp and chemical, a foreign note in the salt air. The work is slow, meditative. The brush, loaded with paint, lays it on in smooth long stroke. Old, peeling layers are covered. The railing's intricate scrollwork requires a smaller brush, a more focused touch. The keeper works for an hour each afternoon, after the morning maintenance, until the job is done. The fresh white gleams against the granite and the sea, a statement of care. The hands smell of turpentine for days afterwards, a ghost of the task lingering on the skin. And then, one utterly ordinary day, a subtle shift occurs within the keeper. It is not prompted by any external change. The wind is negligible. The sea is calm. The barometer is steady, but during the afternoon polishing of the lens, a profound realization settles as gently as dust. There is no separation left between the self and the watch. The polishing is not something the keeper does. It is something that occurs like the tide rising or the lens turning. The thoughts have quieted to the point of near absence. There is only the perception of the moment, the cool glass under the cloth, the quality of the light through the prism, the sound of the sea below, the faint, familiar ache in the shoulder from the winding. Keeper is not a person maintaining a lighthouse. Keeper is the lighthouse's awareness. The stone, the glass, the brass, the flame, they are all one system, and the human mind and body within it are merely the sensitive, mobile part that oils the hinges and trims the wood. It is a state of being so quiet and complete. It is beyond contentment. It is peace, etched into the bone. Night's log entry is no different from any other, but the hand that writes it moves with a fluid certainty that is new. Thought. The words flow onto the page, not as a record, but as a natural secretion of the day, like the limestone secreting its moisture. All conditions unchanged, all apparatus in order. The summer comes, bringing long, luminous twilights where the light is not lit until very late, and dawn comes early. The keeper's sleep grows shorter, but it is a deeper, more perfect rest. The body has fully sensed with the rhythms of light and dark. Food is fuel. Water is taste. The view from the gallery is a painting that changes infinitely yet remains forever the same. The keeper's face, seen in the small spotted mirror above the wash basin, has changed. The lines are not of worry or laughter, but of weathering, of having been placed in a consistent, gentle wind. The eyes are the color of the sea on a calm day, and just as still, one still night, after lighting the lamp, the keeper remains in the lantern room as the last of the color drains from the sky. The first sweep of the beam catches something on the water, close in, a dark, sleek head, then another. A pair of seals have hauled out on the flat rock in the cove, the one exposed at low tide. They are silvery gray in the blinding flash, then gone into the dark, then revealed again on the next sweep. They are resting, passive, their forms growing more distinct as the eyes adjust to the strobe-lit world. They are unaware of, or unconcerned by, the great eye sweeping over them every 30 seconds. They belong here as much as the rock itself. The keeper watches them for a long time, until the moon, a thin silver pairing, rises and adds its own feeble light to the scene. The seals eventually slip back into the black water, with a soft, fluid sound lost beneath the waves. Their visit was a gift, a silent acknowledgement from one watcher to another. It was a shared moment in the vast, sleeping world. It is not recorded in the log. Some things are simply kept. The seals do not return the next night, nor the night after. Their absence is not a disappointment, merely a fact. The rock in the cove is just a rock again, dark and slick in the sweeping light, yet their visitation has left a subtle imprint on the atmosphere of the watch, a soft confirmation of the keeper's own place in the order of things, the polishing, the winding, the noting of the barometer. These acts feel less like duties and more like the inherent processes of a living system, akin to the tides or the slow growth of lichen on the north face of the tower. The summer deepens, condensing the air into a warm, salty haze that blurs the line between sea and sky. The horizon softens, sometimes vanishing altogether in the afternoon, making the world a dimensionless bowl of pearly light. In this haze, sound carries with strange clarity. The keeper, while painting the final section of the boathouse door, hears the distant, hollow report of a ship's horn, a sound so far away it seems to come from another epoch. It hangs in the thick air for a long moment before dissipating. The work continues, the brush moving in steady strokes, covering the gray, weathered wood with fresh, opaque white. The smell of paint is strong in a still air, a sharp counterpoint to the organic scents of seaweed and damp stone. Inside, the rhythm adapts to the warmth. The stove remains cold for days on end. The keeper develops a taste for cold meals, thick slices of yesterday's, bread with a smear of preserved fish, crisp radishes from the patch that have bolted slightly in the heat. Their peppery are a small surprise. Water, drawn cool from the deep cistern, tastes of nothing but purity. The afternoon rest is taken not in the chair by the dead stove, but on a folded blanket in the lee of the tower, where a thin sliver of shade moves slowly across the flagstone. Lying there, eyes closed, the keeper feels the sun's warmth on eyelids, hears the lazy buzz of a fly, the endless, sleepy sizzle of waves on shingle far below. It is a different kind of silence, full and drowsy. One such afternoon, a discovery is made. While pulling a few stubborn weeds from the vegetable patch, the keeper's fingers brush against a smooth, cold shape, half buried in the loam near the base of the stone wall. It is a piece of sea glass. Not a common green or brown fragment, but a piece of cobalt blue glass, worn by decades or perhaps centuries of tidal grinding to a perfect frosted oval. Its edges smooth as silk, its heart a deep, oceanic blue. It fits perfectly in the palm of the hand, cool and heavy. Keeper turns it over, studying the way the sun glows through its muted color. Who held the bottle it came from? A sailor, a fisherman. It is an artifact of a human world of commerce and consumption, transformed by the relentless sea into a thing of simple, mute beauty. It is pocketed. Then, the Tobelma, the Tespoidi, Bailey, Conscious Tower. Later, it is placed on the windowsill in the main room, where it catches the low evening light. It becomes part of the environment, a tiny, blue eye looking out to sea. The weather journal is consulted less. The patterns feel known in the bones. A certain sticky stillness in the air, a particular brassy quality to the sunset, speaks of the thunderstorms that occasionally march across the distant mainland, their internal lightning flashing silently behind veils of rain, too far away to hear their thunder. The keeper watches these silent, celestial battles from the gallery, a spectator to drama that touches neither the rock nor the light. The beam cuts through the clear air between the tower and the distant tempest, a column of calm. The equinox approaches. On the equinox approaches. The keeper can feel the planetary tilt shifting. The arc of the sun lowers. The dawn arrives later with a more reluctant light. The first true autumn storm is not a violent breach, but a gradual deepening of the wind that has been whispering for days. It builds from the southwest, a direction that carries the full fetch of the ocean. The sea's mood changes from a rhythmic sigh to a gathering roar. The barometer begins a slow, steady descent. This is not a surprise, but an old song returning. All to Hours of Lighthouse. Preparations are made, not with haste, but with deliberate thoroughness. All loose items on the gallery are secured. The shutters on the leeward side of the boathouse are latched. An extra check is made on the lantern room windows, ensuring their clasps are firm. The log entry notes the falling glass and the rising wind. It is a statement of fact, not concern. The storm arrives at night. It does not strike, it envelops. The wind's moan rises to a shriek, a vibrating howl in the guy wires and around the gallery railings. Rain, hurled almost horizontally, lashes the glass in solid sheets, obscuring the world beyond the lamplight. The tower itself seems to hum, a deep resonant note felt in the teeth and the spine. The keeper, safe within the stone heart of the structure, performs the ultimate duty to witness. Climbing to the lantern room during the worst of it is a battle against the elements. The iron door at the top of the stairs opens against a wall of moving air. The noise is tremendous, a cacophony of screaming wind, pounding rain, and the deeper explosive crashes of waves hitting the cliff face below. Yet inside its glass cage, the lamp burns steadily. The lens turns. The beam, when it flashes, illuminates a madness of white water and driving rain, a scene of sublime, terrifying fury. It is a test, and the light is passing. The keeper stands for only a few minutes, a calm center in the chaos, ensuring the flame is untroubled by drafts that no water has found a way in. It has not. All is secure. The descent is made back into the relative quiet of the stone stairwell. The log will later state, storm conditions, severe acetio gale, tremendous sea, light and mechanism functioning normally. The storm rages for 18 hours. The keeper sleeps little, attuned to the tower's vibrations. There is a profound trust in the stone, built by generations who weathered such blows. When the wind finally begins to abate, dropping from a shriek to a roar, then to a moan, it leaves behind a world utterly spent. The dawn reveals a sea of tortured, heaving gray, streaked with long lines of foam. The air is washed clean, tasting of ozone and shattered water. Debris is everywhere. Clumps of kelp the size of sheep, stranded high on the rocks, splintered pieces of driftwood, a single tragic seabird lying still on the gallery. The keeper disposes of it gently, tipping it over the rail to let the wind carry it out to sea. The cleanup is slow, methodical. Salt crusts every surface. It will take days of wiping to remove the fine white film from all the glass and brass. In the days following the storm, a deep fatigue sets in, not of the body, which is hardy, but of the senses which have been bombarded. Wet, the return to the gentle, negligible wind and calm sea feels like a blessing earned. The routines are performed with a renewed sense of their sacred simplicity. The polishing of a storm-film prism back to perfect clarity is a task of immense satisfaction. The law entries return to their brief, uneventful poetry. One afternoon, a different kind of vessel appears, not a steamer on the horizon, but a small fishing boat, a dory with a tan sail, beating its way clumsily along the coast, far too close to the rock-strewn shallows. The keeper watches from the gallery, a knot of mild tension forming, a sensation so foreign. It feels physical. The boat is poorly handled. It tacks, loses wind, drift. The beam of the light is hours from being lit. The fog bell is silent in the calm. The keeper considers, for the first time in years, the rocket apparatus stored in the boathouse, the breech's buoy meant for such moments. But then, a mile down the coast, the little boat catches a steady gust. Its sail fills, and it moves away, skirting the danger, growing smaller as it heads towards the distant harbor. Not dissolves. The keeper exhales, unaware of having held the breath. The incident is a ripple, a reminder that the light's purpose, while usually abstract, is rooted in the frail lives of men on the sea. It is noted with spare clarity. 16. Zeroto. Small fishing dory observed navigating inshore waters. Cleared eastern point without incident. Autumn solidifies. The days shorten noticeably. The keeper begins the process of winterproofing. The vegetable patch is put to bed, the last potatoes harvested, the stalks of the cabanes cut and added to the compost. The herbs are picked and hung in the storeroom to dry, their scents filling the small space with memories of summer sun. The storm shutters for the lower windows are taken from their racks, their hinges oiled and tested. A store of extra fuel for the stove is organized neatly by the outside wall. These tasks are performed with a quiet pleasure, a participation in the cyclical closing down of the world. The first frost comes on a night of perfect stillness. The keeper finds it in the morning, a delicate, crystalline fur, silvering the flagstones, etching each blade of grass on the turf roof of the boathouse, making the world crunch softly underfoot. The air is knife cold and utterly pure. The sea is a motionless, dark mirror, reflecting the hard, bright stars of the pre-dawn. Inside the lantern room, the contrast between the residual warmth of the lamp and the fierce cold outside is extreme. The glass of the lens is almost painfully cold to the touch. The breath clouds thickly in the air. The work is done with slightly stiffer fingers, the metal of the tools bitingly cold. It is a new sensory layer added to the ritual. The turning of the year is not celebrated, but observed. The keeper feels it in the angle of the sun as it barely clears the southern headland at noon, casting long, deep shadows that never leave the northern side of the tower. The sunsets are brief, fiery affairs that bleed out quickly into long indigo twilight. The lamp burns for longer and longer each night, its beam a lonely companion to the winter stars that now blaze with cold intensity. On the shortest day, the keeper performs a private, unacknowledged ritual. After the midday meal, the keeper climbs to the lantern room, not to work, but to stand at the eastern window. The sun, a pale, low coin of light, hangs just above the sea in the south. The keeper watches it trace its shallow, pathetic arc, a journey that seems to lack all conviction. At its zenith, it provides no warmth, only a directionless, watery light. The keeper stands there until it begins its quickening descent towards the western horizon. There is a solidarity in this observation. The light is at its weakest, just as the keeper's vigil is at its longest. They are partners in this annual minima. There is no sadness in it, only a recognition of the depth of the cycle. The dark is not an enemy, but the other half of the breath. The lamp will burn tonight for over 16 hours. It is equal to the task. That, after lighting the lamp, the keeper does not immediately descend. The sky is utterly clear, and a new moon has left the heavens black and depthless. The beam, sweeping across the water, seems to catch on the Milky Way, as if combing through the stars. The cold is absolute, a presence that presses from all sides. The keeper remains until the cold has seeped through the thick coat and begun to whisper to the bones. Then, and only then, is it time to go below, to the small fire and the lamplight and the waiting logbook. The entry is the same as always, but the hand that writes it is steady, the mind behind it clear and calm as the frozen air outside. The longest night has begun. The watch continues. All is in order. The flame above burns, a tiny, defiant sun, in a cosmos of darkness, and the keeper, its guardian, is at peace with the vast, beautiful, indifferent turn of the world. The frost persisted, not as a single morning's wonder, but as a permanent state. It crept into the stone of the tower, a deep, stored cold that no fire could fully banish. The keeper adapted. The morning ritual now began in darkness, so complete it felt solid. The climb to the lantern room was made by the faint, bobbing light of a handheld bullseye lantern, its yellow circle trembling on the worn iron steps, isolating frost crystals on the stone walls that glittered like embedded diamonds. The world outside the glass was a void. Extinguishing the lamp was a surrender to that void, but a temporary one. The smell of the spent wick was stronger in the cold, still air. The residual warmth of the glass chimney was a fleeting treasure, a last ghost of the night's work to be clasped in stiffening hands before it faded. The day's first light was a slow, grudging affair. It was less an illumination and more a dilution of the blackness to a deep iron gray. On clear days, the sunrise was a bloody gash along the southeastern horizon, offering no warmth, only a bleak and beautiful spectacle. On most days, The light simply seeped through a uniform blanket of low gunmetal cloud. The sea during these short days was a restless, lead-colored beast, its surface perpetually ruffled by the chill northeasterlies that now dominated. The waves were not grand, storm-born rollers, but short, steep, and spiteful, slapping against the cliff base with a sound like wet gravel being poured. The outdoor rounds became an exercise in endurance. Exercise in endurance. The coat was supplemented with a thick scarf wound high and mittens over thinner gloves for dexterity. The anemometer's cups often whirred with a sharp icy sound. The rain gauge was checked for ice, sometimes requiring a gentle tap to free a plug of frozen precipitation. The vegetable patch was a wasteland of frozen stalks and iron-hard earth. The keeper's breath plumed in great clouds, and the cold air bit at the lungs with each inhale. A sharp, clean pain. These rounds were no longer leisurely. They were efficient, purposeful conquests of the elements. A swift and thorough survey of the kingdom to ensure its integrity against the winter's siege. Indoors, the stove became the sun. Its management was a central pillar of the day. The wood, stored and seasoned under a tarpaulin, was carried in armfuls that shed bark, and the scent of pine and oak. Splitting the larger logs with a maul was a morning task that warmed the blood. The thwack and cleave of the blade, a satisfying, primal sound in the still, cold air. The fire was banked carefully at night, coaxed to life each morning, fed steadily through the day. Its heat was a radiating presence, uneven but vital. One side of the main room would be warm enough to shed a layer, while shadows in the corners held a perpetual chill. The keeper learned to move within these zones of temperature, to sit in the pool of warmth from the stovepipe, to avoid the draft that snuck under the door like an invisible cold tongue. The work in the lantern room took on a new, meticulous quality. Cold made everything more brittle, more deliberate. The oil in its reservoir was thicker, flowing more sluggishly when refilled. The brass of the tools was so cold, it threatened to steal the skin from bare fingertips. The keeper worked with a focused, unhurried precision, mindful of the unyielding nature of frozen metal and glass. Polishing the lens was now a battle against condensation as much as salt. The warmth of breath and body could fog the very glass one. Sought to clarify, requiring pauses, different cloths. The clockwork mechanism's oil was checked for viscosity, a special winter-grade formula that ensured the gears would turn smoothly despite the deep chill of the stone tower. The afternoons, once a time for reading or mending in the chair, now often centered on the stove for sheer survival. The mending basket saw more use. A heavy quilt, its batting clumped with age, was carefully unstitched along one seam, its inner wool teased apart and redistributed with careful fingers, then closed again with tiny, even stitches. The act was slow, methodical, a meditation on preservation. Socks were darned with double-thick yarn. The keeper's own clothing was inspected for thin spots, reinforced before they became holes. This was not boredom, but a deep, practical engagement with the means of enduring. Food shifted entirely to stores. Root vegetables from the cellar, potatoes, turnips, and carrots, grown hard and sweet by the frost, simmered for hours in a pot on the stove with a ham and bone, filling the room with a dense, savory. Oatmeal was a constant. Hard biscuits, dunked in tea, were sustenance. The simplicity was absolute, and the flavors, though few, were profound in their context. A spoonful of blackberry jam, preserved from the autumn, was a startling burst of summer on the tongue, a memory of sun and bees in a jar. The nights were immense. The lamp was lit in what felt like mid-afternoon, its lighting a defiant act against the premature dusk. The keeper would often remain in the lantern room after the ritual, watching as the last color was leached from the world. The beam's power was magnified by the early darkness, seeming to carve a brighter, harder path through the gloom. On clear, frigid nights, the phenomenon of sea smoke would occur, a thick, eerie fog that rose from the relatively warmer sea meeting the bitterly cold air, blanketing the water in a shifting, phantom landscape. The beam would lance through this fog, creating solid, cone-shaped avenues of light, illuminating the swirling tendrils, a spectacle of pure physics that felt ghostly and alive. One such night, a sound pierced the routine silence, a sound not of the sea or the wind. It was a faint, distant, rhythmic booming, like a great, slow heartbeat. Boom, 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 boom. The keeper stood still on the gallery, the cold forgotten. It was the sound of pack ice, far out to sea, grinding against itself. It was a sound heard only in the deepest winters, a reminder that the sea itself could freeze, that the liquid world could become a solid, fracturing plain. It was a sound of elemental power, indifferent and ancient. The keeper listened until limbs ached with cold, then went below and wrote in the log 22-0. Audible pack ice to the north, unusual for this latitude. Severe frost continues. The days began to blend into one another, a seamless tapestry of grey light, stove tending, meticulous maintenance, and long, star-blasted night. The keeper's world contracted to the stone tower. The circle of lamplight, the rhythm of the flame, the line between one day and the next, existed only in the logbook, in the slow filling of its pages, with nearly identical script. A Monday was distinguishable from a Thursday only by a slight shift in wind direction, or a brief afternoon flurry of granular snow that hissed against the windows before vanishing. Then, a subtle change. The sun, on its low arc, began to linger a minute longer. The keeper noticed it not by clock, but by a faint, almost imperceptible brightening of the gray during the final polish of the afternoon lens. The bloody sunrise gash began to appear a hair's breadth further north along the horizon each morning. The deep, stored cold in the stones remained, but the bite of the air during the midday rounds softened from a razor's edge to a blunt pressure. Pack ice fell, silent. The northeasterly winds began to falter, replaced by days of strange, breathless calm, or by gentle These breezes felt alien, almost shockingly soft, against a face hardened by winter's lash. The first true sign of the thaw's approach was the water. Drip, then another. From the eaves of the boathouse, from the iron gutters of the tower itself. At first, it was a sporadic, frozen melody, a plink into a puddle that immediately skimmed with ice. But gradually, the drips became a trickle, then a steady, syncopated patter. The sound of melting was everywhere, a gentle percussion section to the sea's bass drone. The great icicles that had fanged the gallery's edge began to shrink, shedding crystalline tears, their tips sharpening to dangerous points, before falling in silent, glassy shatters to the rocks below. The keeper's routine shifted again, subtly. The stove required less fuel. The heavy mittens could be left off during the lantern work. The afternoon sun, still weak, now held a faint, genuine warmth. If one stood directly in its path on the leeward side of the tower, the keeper found oneself doing just that, eyes closed, face turned to the pale yellow disk, soaking in the sensation like a lizard on a stone. It was a physical pleasure, profound in its simplicity. The log entries began to note the recession of winter. Ice drip, continuous from north eaves, south wind, mild. Frost absent from sheltered areas. The words felt lighter on the page. One morning, a miracle. In the sheltered corner formed by the base of the tower and the stone wall of the vegetable patch, where the wind rarely scoured and the sun now lingered, a patch of snow had melted to reveal not frozen dirt, but a cluster of green. Not the dark, leathery green of winter cabbage, but the tender, sharp green of snowdrops. Their white buds were still tightly closed, huddled against the soil, but their leaves were unequivocally, vibrantly alive. The keeper knelt, a stiff movement in cold joints, and touched them. They were cold and waxy, but they were there, a promise made and kept by the earth. For a long time, the keeper simply crouched there, watching them, as if expecting them to vanish. They did not. They were the first word of a new sentence. The world was beginning to speak. Of it, the following week brought the rains. Not the icy needles of winter, but soft, gentle, soaking rains that fell straight down from low, soft-bellied clouds. They muted the world, turned the flagstones dark and glossy, filled the air with a rich petrichor scent. Even from the rocky soil, the keeper worked to the sound of rain drumming on the lantern room glass. A sound that was soothing, generative. The moss on the north side of the tower visibly plumped up, turning a luminous emerald green. Lichens drank deeply and seemed to glow. The rhythm of the light remained a constant, the heartbeat. But now, the body of the world around it was waking up. The keeper's own body felt it too. A slight quickening in the blood, a desire to be outdoors, not just for duty, but to witness the change. The rounds took longer. The keeper would pause by the tidal pool to watch the slow unfurling of a new strand of kelp, or stop on the path to observe the frantic, joyful activity of the returning oyster catchers, their pied plumage stark against the wet rocks, their piercing cleat. The planning began, not the defensive planning of winter, but the generative planning of spring. The seed packets, kept dry and safe in a tin, were brought out and examined. Peas, carrots, tall, hardy greens, mondial, lievete, nandesalnotie. Hardy greens. The soil in the vegetable patch would need turning, the compost added. The thought was not a chore, but a pleasure. The blue glass on the windowsill now caught the light of a stronger sun, casting a tiny azure puddle on the floorboards that moved slowly across the room. As the earth turned, the keeper was entering the tower one evening after a soft rain. The scent of wet stone and awakening earth rich in the air, when a familiar, forgotten sound made them stop. At first, it was integrated into the sound of the dripping eaves. But it was separate, a delicate, musical trickling. The keeper traced it to the downspout from the cistern overflow. For the first time since autumn, the cistern was full to overflowing from the rains, and the excess was now spilling over, not in a frozen silence, but in a cheerful, liquid babble as it ran down a stone channel to the rocks. Vicar stood and listened to this sound of abundance, of winters, and confirmed. It was a sound more eloquent than any log entry could be. That night, the keeper made the evening ascent, as the last of the twilight held a clear greenish tint in the west. A tint that had been absent for months. The lighting of the lamp felt different. It was no longer a defiance of endless night, but a graceful passing of the torch from the sun, which had done its work well that day, to the flame, which would now guide the softer, kinder darkness. The beam swept across a sea that was no longer leaden, but held the deep, mysterious purple of the approaching night. The keeper lingered, not against the cold, but in a kind of gratitude. The wheel had turned. The watch had been held through the deepest dark. The lighthouse stood. Once the light burned, and in the sheltered corner below, a cluster of green leaves promised white flowers. All, indeed, was in a state of perpetual cycling order. The story was not one of events, but of this faithful, patient attendance through the great, slow breath of the world. The logbook awaited, but for now there was only the turning lens, the sighing sea, and the quiet, unwavering flame at the heart of it all. The cheerful overflow of the cistern continued for 3 days, a constant, liquid chorus beneath the patter of rain and the sigh of wind. It was a music of surplus, a sound the keeper had almost forgotten. Then, under a sudden, brilliant sun that broke the cloud blanket with assertive warmth, the overflow slowed to a trickle, then ceased. The cistern was full, its dark, cool waters waiting. The sound of its silence was different now. A satisfied, brimming quiet. This new sun had power. It did not just illuminate, it warmed. What? The keeper, ascending to the lantern room for the midday polish, felt its heat through the glass for the first time since autumn. It was a palpable pressure on the skin of the hand held near pain. The residual winter chill that always lurked in the stone of the tower seemed to flinch back, retreating into the deepest core of the masonry. The air in the high glass cage lost its knife edge, becoming merely cool. The washing cloths, which had always carried a faint dampness from the ambient cold, now dried quickly if left folded on the brass rail. The snowdrops fulfilled their promise. Their white bells opened, each one a perfect, nodding cup, freckled with green on the inside. They seemed impossibly delicate against the rugged stone and the still sleeping earth. The keeper visited them each morning, not as a duty, but as a pilgrimage to this small, defiant altar of life. Their fragrance was negligible, a mere hint of green, but their presence was a tonic. They were noted in the log with a brevity that belied their importance. Snowdrops in bloom and lee of tower. With the sun's strength came the wind's caprice. The steady, brutal northeasterlies were a memory. Now the winds tested every direction. They came from the south, smelling of damp loam and distant plowland. They swung to the west, carrying the sharp iodine tang of the open ocean. They whispered from the east, still holding a memory of ice from the far-off shore. Each shift changed the voice of the place. The keeper learned the new language. A south wind meant the lantern room would be warmer, but a haze might blur the horizon by afternoon. A west wind brought clarity so sharp it hurt the eyes, and the sound of the sea became a crisp, crashing rhythm. An east wind was the coolest, drying the flagstones quickly, but bringing no real warmth. The routine of maintenance adapted to these nuances. On clear, windy days from the west, the polishing was almost superfluous. The air itself seemed to scour the glass clean. The keeper would perform it anyway, for the ritual's sake, but the cloth came away nearly spotless. On still, hazy days with a southern breath, A fine invisible film of pollen or dust could settle even at this height, requiring a more vigorous, dampened clean. The world beyond the rock began to reassert itself. The gulls, which had been sporadic, weather-beaten phantoms through the winter, returned in boisterous, arguing flocks. Their nests on the cliff faces became centers of frantic activity. Their cries a constant, rasping commentary from dawn to dusk. The keeper observed the intricate, often brutal, social dramas, the disputes over nesting sites, the mating rituals, the first clumsy flights of last year's young. It was a society, chaotic and loud, and its energy seeped into the atmosphere of the rock. Then, one afternoon, a new sound woven into the avian cacophony. A deep, resonant, three-note call. Cronk, cronk, cronk. The keeper looked up. Two vast black shapes, their wings broad as planks, rode the thermal rising from the sun-warmed cliff. Ravens. They circled once, twice, their intelligent eyes surely taking in the tower. The keeper a tiny figure on the gallery, before banking away inland with a majestic, dismissive grace. Their visit felt like an inspection by ancient royalty. They were creatures of myth and headland, and their brief acknowledgement carried a weight the gull's endless noise did not. Life emerged in the tidal pool with a sudden, explosive fervor. What had been a clear, cold basin became a teeming, miniature world. Tiny, transparent shrimps darted in clouds. Brittle stars unfolded their skinny arms under ledges. Anemones, looking like lumps of dull jelly in winter, now bloomed open into gorgeous, tentacled flowers of deep mauve and olive green. The keeper would spend spare moments kneeling on the damp rock, simply watching this underwater ballet. It was a lesson in quiet, relentless proliferation. The act of observing it felt like a form of participation. Baker's own body felt this seasonal quickening. There was a restlessness in the limbs that the meticulous, indoor tasks of winter could no longer entirely satisfy. The solution presented itself in the form of the vegetable patch. The time had come to turn the earth. The tools were brought out from the boathouse. A spade, a three-pronged fork, their wooden handles smooth and dark with old sweat and soil. The ground was still cold and heavy, but it was workable. The first thrust of the spade into the dark loam was a profound sensation. The smell that rose was rich, deep, and complex, of decay giving birth to life. It was the smell of the planet's engine. Turning the soil was hard, physical labor. Muscles long used to the fine motor skills of polishing and winding now protested, then warmed, then fell into a satisfying repetitive ache. The keeper worked in spells. An hour in the morning after lantern duties, an hour in the afternoon. The world narrowed to the bite of the spade, the crumble of the earth, the occasional startled worm. Thoughts dissolved into the rhythm of lift, turn, break, lift, turn, break. It was a meditation of a different, more primal sort. Once the patch was turned, the compost from the bin, a dark, sweet-smelling, crumbly humus, was forked in and worked through. The soil, now fed and aerated, looked expectant. The seed packets were opened. Peas, their seeds wrinkled and promising, were pressed into shallow trenches. Carrot seeds, fine as dust, were sprinkled with a careful hand. Rows of spinach and hardy lettuce were marked with string and little stick. The act of planting was one of pure faith. It was a contract with the future, a promise to tend and protect in exchange for growth. The keeper watered the newly planted rose with rainwater from a barrel, the gentle sprinkle a benediction. Indoors, the change of season demanded its own reckoning. The heavy winter curtains were taken down, beaten free of dust over the gallery rail, and stored in a cedar chest. The windows, their panes washed with vinegar water until they sparkled, were left unshuttered to drink in the lengthening light. The stale, closed-in air of winter was swept out by breezes that now carried the scent of the sea, and faintly, the floral perfume of gorse beginning to bloom on the mainland cliffs miles away. The stove was allowed to go cold for days at a time. But its iron presence, once the heart of the room, became a dormant, black monolith. The light schedule shifted subtly with the later sunsets. The keeper now performed the evening lighting in a world that was still full of color, the sky often a wash of peach and lavender, the sea holding a deep luminous blue. The lamp's initial flame seemed almost timid against such a backdrop, a tiny man-made star asserting itself before the celestial display faded. The first sweep of the beam no longer cut a stark path through utter blackness, but seemed to gather up the last of the twilight and hurl it seaward. One such evening, with the sky still holding a memory of light in the west, the keeper witnessed a migration. At first, it was a faint, chirping chatter high above, almost beyond hearing. Then, as the eyes adjusted to the deep blue vault, they appeared. Countless tiny darting shapes, like flecks of soot blown across the heavens, all moving in a steady, purposeful stream northward. Birds, too, thousands of them, warblers, pipits, perhaps swallows, returning to their summer ground. They were a river of life in the sky, a silent, urgent exodus witnessed from this lonely rock. They took half an hour to pass. The keeper stood on the gallery, neck craned until the last straggler vanished into the gloom of the north. The air felt charged with their passage, with the sheer, immense energy of a continent on the move. It was a humbling spectacle. The log entry was simple. Evening. Your northward migration observed overhead. The days grew longer, warmer, softer. The keeper found new rhythms. The early morning polish was done in a room, flooded with gentle light. The afternoons might include a slow, observational walk around the entire perimeter of the island, not for inspection but for witness, to see which wildflowers had emerged in the cliff-top grass, thrift beginning. The peas in the vegetable patch broke the soil, fragile green hooks that straightened and unfurled into delicate tendril. The keeper erected a framework of twigs for them to climb, a miniature architecture of support. The first carrot seedlings appeared, feathery and impossibly fine. Weeding became a daily minute task, a plucking of tiny, intrusive greens from between the rows, a nurturing of the chosen order. The keeper's internal world had settled into a deep, resonant harmony with this external cycle. The frantic, driven energy of the autumn preparations, the deep, focused endurance of the winter, the gentle, eager awakening of the spring. They were all parts of a whole. The keeper was no longer just a caretaker of a machine, but a tendril of life integrated into this specific point of rock and sky. The polishing of the lens was as natural as the blooming of the thrift. The winding of the clock was as inevitable as the turning of the tide. There was no separation. The logbook entries, while still factual, began to carry this unspoken unity. They were not just records of the light, but brief, haiku-like notes on the state of a complete living system. A slight breeze, peas, 3 inches, lens clear, tian, Atalmaya was out for 3, oyster catchers fledging, eye, and through it all, the light turned. Its beam swept across the calm seas of spring nights, across the occasional misty rain showers, across the starry skies that were now less fiercely cold, but no less magnificent. It was the constant. The keeper's life had become an elaborate, beautiful, silent dance around that single, unwavering point of flame and glass and purpose. The story was not in the events, but in the deepening of this bond, in the slow, total fusion of a human spirit with a place and a duty, until the very concepts of keeper and light lost their distinction, and there was only the watch, eternal and serene. The gentle spring deepened, not with a rush, but with a slow green exhalation. The on the cliff tops erupted into dense, cushiony mounds of candy pink, a color so vibrant against the gray rock and blue sea, it seemed almost audacious. Their honeyed scent, faint from the tower, grew stronger on warm afternoons, carried up on thermals with the lazy circling of the first butterflies, tortoiseshells, their wings like stained glass, and pale fluttering cabbage whites. The keeper noted their arrival not in the log, but in the quiet museum of memory, another brushstroke in the year's painting. The rhythm of the days now incorporated the garden's needs. Early mornings after the lamp was extinguished and the high glass polished were for watering. The keeper used a battered tin watering can, filled from the rain barrel. The act was a slow, deliberate baptism. Each pea plant, each row of feathery carrots, each cluster of lettuce received its share, the water soaking into the dark earth with a soft gulping sound. The keeper observed the minute changes daily, a new leaf, a lengthening tendril that had blindly found a twig and curled around it with tender green determination. This was a progress measured in millimeters, a time scale as patient as geology. The sea's mood shifted with the season. The violent heaving gray of winter was gone, replaced by a more variable palette. There were days of utter calm, when the water was a sheet of polished silk, reflecting the sky so perfectly the horizon vanished, and the tower seemed to float in the center of a blue and white sphere. On these days, the world was hushed, the only sound the distant liquid chuckle of water in the rocky inlets far below. Then a breeze would stir, from the west perhaps, and the silk would be ruffled into a million sparkling sequins, and the horizon would reassert itself as a clean, hard line. The sound would return, a friendly, shushing rush rather than a boom. The keeper's clothing changed with the warmth. The heavy, oiled wool coat was hung on a peg by the door, a bulky ghost of winter. It was replaced by a lighter, canvas smock for outdoor work. The fingers that handled the polishing cloths and the seed packets were bare, the skin pale but growing firmer, relearning the textures of sun-warmed brass and damp soil. One afternoon, a new task presented itself. Born of observation, the keeper noticed that the paint on the weather station's post, refreshed just last autumn, was already looking blistered and sad from the winter's salt lash. It was not urgent, but it was a flaw in the order. The white paint tin was retrieved from the boathouse, the brush found. This was not the large-scale painting of the summer, but a small, precise act of repair. The keeper worked slowly, carefully covering the peeled patches, laying on smooth strokes that feathered into the old paint. The smell was sharp in the still air, A single bee, confused by the white, buzzed inquisitively around the wet post before veering off towards the pink thrift. When done, the post stood crisp and bright again, a little sentinel of order against the wild backdrop. The satisfaction was quiet and deep. The lengthening evenings brought a new phenomenon to the watch. As the sun set later, its dying rays would sometimes strike the great Fresnel lens at a perfect low angle, just before the keeper ascended to light the lamp. For a few minutes, the dormant, cold glass would catch fire, not with its own light, but with the sun's. Prisms would flash with isolated stunning colors, a bolt of emerald, a splash of ruby, a beam of pure violet, that would chase each other around the lantern room walls as the sun slid down. It was a secret light show, a preview of the lamp's glory, seen only by the keeper. It felt like a gift, a private conversation between the sun and the apparatus that would soon take over its duty. Nights were shorter, but no less profound. The air was often mild enough to spend time on the gallery after lighting. The lamp without the desperate clutch of cold. The keeper would stand, leaning against the still warm stone, watching the beam carve its path across a sea that was now often alive with bioluminescence. On nights when the water was stirred by a gentle swell, the breaking wave crests would glow with a cold, electric blue-green fire. The lighthouse beam, sweeping over this, would create a breathtaking spectacle. A path of white light overlaid on a path of shimmering, living blue. It was as if the sea itself was acknowledging the light, answering with its own primordial glow. The keeper would watch until the shoulders grew stiff, mesmerized by this silent dialogue of light. The first harvest was not of vegetables, but of knowledge. The keeper had kept a diligent, if unspoken, log of the garden's progress in a separate, smaller notebook. Dates of planting, first sprouts, weather note. It was a science of small things. And then, one evening for supper, there were the first greens. A handful of young, tender spinach leaves, barely a mouthful each, rinsed under rainwater and eaten raw. Their taste was astonishing. A bright, mineral-rich, profoundly green flavor that seemed the very essence of the spring sun and the fertile soil. It was a revelation. The logbook's entry that night included, after the weather and the light status, a single triumphant line. First spinach cut. The animal life grew bolder. The ravens, now a constant presence, became accustomed to the keeper's shape, moving about the rock. They would often perch on the boathouse roof, their sleek heads cocked, observing with an intelligence that felt unsettlingly familiar. One day the keeper left a small, worn-out leather glove on the garden wall. On returning an hour later, it was gone. Looking up, the keeper saw one of the ravens on its nest, the black glove a dark blotch among the twigs, being meticulously picked apart. It was not theft, but acquisition. The keeper felt a strange sense of courtesy, as if a tribute had been accepted. Then came the fog season. It was not the dense, icy fog of winter, but a soft, warm, blinding whiteness that rolled in from the sea on still mornings. It swallowed the world, reducing it to a circle of damp flagstones and the faint, looming shape of the tower's base. Sound became distorted, muffled. The foghorn's automatic blast, so rarely heard in winter gales when the wind carried the sound away, now became the voice of the rock. Its deep, mournful burr echoed in the blankness every 30 seconds, a sonic lighthouse. The keeper's world contracted to the interior of the tower, to the close, damp air Polishing the lens on such days felt like polishing the inside of a cloud. Yet, there was a coziness to it, a sense of being wrapped in a protective cocoon of whiteness where the only responsibilities were the immediate ones. The wick, the glass, the flame, the logbook. The fog would sometimes burn off by midday, dissolving with dramatic speed to reveal a world washed clean and sparkling. Other times it lingered into the evening, forcing an earlier lighting of the lamp. On one such evening, as the keeper performed the ritual in the familiar, close grey world of the lantern room, a strange thing happened. Just as the flame was lit and the beam began its first sweep, the fog outside thinned for a moment, not clearing, but becoming a luminous, diffused screen. And on that screen, projected by the powerful beam, was the keeper's own shadow, magnified to a gigantic dark silhouette that stretched out across the swirling vapor, over the invisible sea, and into infinity. It was there for only a few seconds before the fog closed in again, swallowing the image. The keeper stood very still. It had been a glimpse of one's own imprint on the vastness, a momentary, colossal echo of self. It was neither comforting nor frightening. It was merely a fact, as neutral and immense as the rock itself. The moment passed. The beam continued its turn. The log entry made no mention of it. As the days lengthened towards the summer solstice, the pace of life on the rock seemed to reach a quiet, sustained peak. The garden was a tapestry of green. The peas flowered, delicate white and purple blossoms that would become pods. The carrots needed thinning, a fiddly task that yielded tiny, hair-like roots with an intense, sweet perfume. The lighthouse demanded its constant care, but the work was fluid, effortless, a dance performed with muscles and mind perfectly tuned. The keeper's internal state had settled into what could only be called a seamless awareness. There was no longer a sense of waiting for something or enduring until a season passed. There was only the rich, detailed present, each moment containing the whole. The smell of the oil, the feel of the sun, the sound of the oyster catchers, the taste of the water, the sweep of the light. The past was the previous logbook on the shelf. The future was the next turn of the lens. The keeper was the hyphen between them, the living point where the endless cycle was witnessed and tended. It was a state of grace earned not through prayer, but through attention. The long, slow story of the lighthouse keeper was not one of events, but of this gradual total absorption into the perpetual, beautiful, uneventful now. The wind might be negligible or from the south. The sea might be calm or moderate. The garden might need watering or thinning. The lens might need polish or not. The logbook awaited its entry, and all, in every conceivable way, was in a deep, resonant, and everlasting order. The peak of the solstice arrived not as a climax, but as a lingering, golden plateau. The sun seemed to pause at its zenith, pouring light over the rock for what felt like an age. The keeper's schedule adjusted to this maximum day. The lamp was lit so late it felt like a betrayal of the still bright sky, and extinguished so early the dawn seemed to interrupt a shallow sleep. In these white nights, the lighthouse's purpose felt almost theoretical, a practice for the darker times. Yet the rituals were performed without deviation, for the rhythm itself was the truth, not the immediate need. In the long luminous twilight after the lamp was lit, the keeper began a new, unofficial practice. With a cup of cool mint tea from leaves dried last summer, The keeper would sit on the top step of the iron staircase, just inside the open door to the lantern room. From here, one could feel the gentle exhalation of the day's warmth from the stone. Hear the precise click-clack of the turning mechanism, and watch the beam slice through the indigo haze that finally gathered over the sea. It was a moment of pure attendance, a bridge between the active day and the silent watch of the night. The garden, in its solstice abundance, began to give in earnest. The pea pods fattened, their curves smooth and cool against the palm. Keeper learned the perfect moment to harvest. When the pods were just shy of being rounded, their peas sighed, sweet and tiny. A handful gathered each day became a raw accompaniment to the evening meal. The first true carrots, pulled as thinning yielded to harvest, were no thicker than a finger, their orange a shocking sunset hue in the earth's darkness. Eaten crisp, with a faint grit of soil that spoke of their origin, they tasted of concentrated sunlight. This slow daily gathering was a communion. The keeper's body was now partly sustained by the very patch of earth it tended, a closed loop of care and nourishment that felt ancient and right. The weather during this period was not so much stable as benevolent. Soft breezes, later, sporadic, warm rains that fell at night, heard through sleep as a gentle patter on the slate roof, watering the garden so the keeper need not. Mornings after such rains were jewel-like, every spiderweb in the thrift beaded with crystal, the air so clear, the distant mainland houses seemed, within, touching distant. One such pristine morning, a disturbance, a sound not of nature, but of industry. The low, steady thrum of a diesel engine. The keeper, polishing the lens, saw it approach from the southeast. The tender vessel, a squat, practical boat with the lighthouse service insignia on its wheelhouse. It was the biannual call, bringing supplies and potentially a relief keeper. The rhythm of the rock was about to be punctuated by the outside world. The keeper watched its approach with a detachment that was almost clinical. The boat anchored carefully in the deep channel off the lee of the island. A small dinghy was lowered. Two figures rowed towards the tiny stone jetty below the boathouse. The keeper descended the tower, not with haste, but with the deliberate pace of one meeting a minor, scheduled event. The meeting on the jetty was cordial, muted. There was the supply officer, a man named Evans, with a weathered face and few words, and a young, new assistant keeper, his eyes wide, taking in the isolation with a mixture of awe and trepidation. His name was Arlen. "Well, just a few days," Evans said, his voice rough from the sea air. "Give young Arlen here a taste of the light. See the routine." The keeper nodded. Words felt unnecessary, but were supplied. "The guest cot is in the storeroom, dry." For 3 days, the tower held 2 heartbeats. Keeper's routine continued, but with a shadow, an echo. Arlen was eager, nervous, his movements just a fraction too quick, his voice breaking the silence with questions that felt loud as shout. "How often do you wind it? Is the water always this cold? Have you ever seen a shipwreck?" The keeper answered sparingly, demonstrating by action rather than speech. They showed Arlen the polishing, letting his clumsy hands attempt a prism under close supervision. They let him feel the resistance of the clockwork key as he wound it halfway. They pointed out the weather instruments, the logbook, the precise way to trim the wick. Arlen took it all in, a sponge soaking up a manual. He was a good lad, earnest, but his presence was a scent on the air, a smell of wool, still holding a whiff of mainland smoke, of soap that wasn't the keeper's simple, homemade kind, of a life lived in conversation and company. At night, the keeper would lie awake in the alcove, hyper-aware of the soft snore from the storeroom, of a different weight of another breath in the stone cylinder. It was not unpleasant, but it was a fact, like a stone in a shoe. The keeper's mind, so long used to its own silent company, found itself performing a strange internal translation, putting instinct and ingrained knowledge into words and explanations it no longer normally used. On the second day, during a quiet moment when Arlen was writing a letter at the table, he looked up and asked, "Don't you ever get lonely?" The keeper, who was mending a fishing net, found tangled on the rocks, paused. The question seemed to come from a different language. Lonely implied an absence, a missing piece. The keeper looked around the round room, at the lens turning high above, at the sea through the window, at the garden visible outside. The world was full. It teemed with life, purpose, detail. There was no vacancy here into which loneliness could fit. "No," the keeper said, and the word was final, not harsh, but as solid and unarguable as the tower's foundation. Arlen blinked, nodded slowly, and returned to his letter, perhaps thinking the keeper misunderstood the question. On the morning of the fourth day, Evans returned with the dinghy. Supplies were unloaded. Sacks of flour, sugar, salt, tins of paraffin oil, a box of vegetables from the mainland, a bundle of mail, which for the keeper was a single, official-looking envelope from the service. The new things were carried up and stored. Then it was time. Arlen, his bag packed, stood on the jetty. He had lost some of his nervous edge, replaced by a dawning respect for the scale of the quiet. "Thank you," he said, shaking the keeper's hand. His grip was firm. I'll remember it." The keeper nodded. Fair weather. The dinghy pulled away. The keeper watched until it reached the tender vessel, until the figures climbed aboard, until the anchor was raised and the boat turned, its engine thrum growing fainter, its shape dissolving into the sea haze. Then the keeper turned and climbed the path back to the tower. The silence that resumed was not the same silence as before. For a few hours, it felt chosen, deeper and more precious for having been shared, and then reclaimed. The keeper moved through the rooms, through the routines, feeling the space settle back into its familiar contours, like water smoothing over a stone after a ripple. The official letter was opened. It contained the usual service bulletins, a notice of a slight increase in paraffin allowance, and a form to be filled out for annual leave. The keeper set it aside on the desk. The notion of leaving the rock, of stepping onto a boat not to fetch supplies from a jetty, but to travel to a bustling port, felt as abstract and distant as the mathematics of celestial navigation. It was a possibility that held no shape, no urgency. The form would wait. The days after the visit felt distilled. The keeper's appreciation for the solitude was renewed. But it was a quieter, more profound appreciation, free of any defiance. It was simply the condition of being. The garden continued to give. The first new potatoes were dug, tiny, waxy marbles that burst with flavor when boiled with a sprig of thyme. The lettuce formed soft, green hearts. The keeper ate what the garden provided, and the mainland vegetables in the store remained untouched, a reserve for a future that felt increasingly irrelevant. One still afternoon, a spectacle of peace. The keeper was sitting on the sun-warmed bench by the vegetable patch, eyes half closed, when a movement on the water caught their eye. A basking shark, its great dark dorsal fin tutting the glassy surface with serene slowness, was cruising just beyond the tide line. It was enormous, a creature of another time, filtering the plankton-rich water with a silent, immense grace. It circled lazily for nearly an hour, a drifting island of life, before its fin gradually sank beneath the surface and vanished. The keeper had not moved. The encounter required no log entry. It was a gift received in full, a reminder that the rock was a perch on the edge of a world of majestic, silent scale. As high summer began its slow golden decline, the keeper's internal state achieved a new plateau. The mind was not empty, but it was free of clutter. It was a perfect instrument of perception. It could note the exact shade of the sea at noon, a deep cobalt blue, streaked with turquoise where sandbanks lay beneath. The specific pitch of the wind in the west wire, a low G it seemed, the main difference in the scent of the air before a weather change. Time ceased to be linear. It became a wheel, and the keeper was at the still, silent hub. The turning of the lens was the wheel's spoke, passing by every 30 seconds, a marker of movement within perfect stillness. The story of the keeper was no longer a narrative. It was a state of being, a long, slow exhalation in harmony with the breath of the sea and the turn of the sky. The log entries continued, but they were now like the steady pulse of a healthy heart, a sign of life, not a record of it. All conditions unchanged, all apparatus in order. The words were true on every possible level. The keeper, the light, the rock, the sea. They were all one apparatus, and all was, and would ever be, in a deep, unwavering, and utterly silent order. The high summer's gold began to soften, not with a sudden change, but with a subtle daily subtraction of light. The sun's arc through the sky was imperceptibly lower. Its zenith at midday no longer felt like a hammer blow of heat, but a gentle, sustained pressure. Deepa felt this in the garden first. The lettuce, which had bolted and grown bitter in the peak heat, was cleared away. The pea plants, their pods now tough and fibrous, were pulled up, their roots adding nitrogen back to the soil. The work of the garden shifted from harvest to preparation. The empty beds were turned over again, a blanket of the finished compost worked in, a quiet invitation extended to the earth for its next offering. This turning of the soil was different from the eager digging of spring. It was slower, more contemplative. The earth was warmer, friable, smelling richly of growth and decay intertwined. The keeper's spade sank in with a soft sigh. Each shovelful revealed the white, blind threads of roots from the departed plants, the occasional glistening curl of a worm, retreating from the light. This was the unseen work, the building of the foundation for seasons yet unborn. The act felt like a dialogue with time itself, acknowledging what had passed, honoring it by preparing for what was to come. The sea, too, began its autumn transformation. The brilliant tourist blue of midsummer deepened to a more serious, profound sapphire. The water lost its lazy, warm torpor. Currents became more defined, visible as subtle, sinuous lines of different texture and color, snaking across the bay. The morning mist returned, but it was a different mist. Colder, born of the night's chill, meeting the water's residual warmth. And it burned off with less certainty, sometimes lingering until noon as a thin, luminous scent lured the keeper's routines adapted to this gentle retreat. The lighter canvas smock was still sufficient for midday, but a woolen sweater was pulled on for the early morning ascent and the evening watch. The stove, a forgotten presence all summer, was given a thorough cleaning. Soot was brushed from its flue, ashes removed from its belly. It was not yet lit, but it was made ready, like a musician tuning an instrument before a performance. This preparation was a form of respect for the cycle, an acknowledgement that the wheel was turning. One afternoon, a signifier of the changing season arrived on the wind. It was a scent, but not of flowers or salt. It was a dry, sweet, melancholic smell of wood smoke. It was so faint it was more of an imagined memory than a true odor, but it was unmistakable. Someone on the distant mainland had lit their first fire of the season. That tiny, far-off act of domestic preparation spoke volumes across the water. Autumn was not just a feeling on the rock, it was a fact in the world. The keeper stood on the gallery, nose lifted, tracing the elusive scent on the southeasterly breeze. It was a message from the tribe of hearths and homes, a reminder of a different kind of warmth, of gathered evenings and closed door. It was noted, not with longing, but with the same detached observation given to a shift in the barometer. The animal life responded to the subtleties the keeper observed. The ravens became more vocal, their conversations atop the boathouse more frequent and complex, a series of clicks, croaks, and gurgles that sounded like planning. They were likely discussing the fledglings, now nearly full-sized, but still begging with persistent, gawky cries. The keeper watched one afternoon as the two adults led their offspring on a flying lesson around the tower, demonstrating the mastery of the updrafts, the young birds, flight unsure but rapidly gaining confidence. It was a passing on of knowledge, an avian version of the keeper showing Arlen how to wind clockwork. The great migration began in reverse. It started with the swallows. One evening, as the keeper sat on the steps, they appeared. Not the thousands of the spring river, but smaller, chattering squadrons skimming over the sea's surface with frantic insect-hunting agility. They would rest for a day or two, peppering the sky above the rock with their swift, acrobatic turns, their forked tails like dark scissors snipping the twilight before vanishing south again. Their presence was transient, urgent. They were living arrows shot from the bow of winter, and the rock was merely a way station on their desperate flight to sun. The keeper felt a new companionship with these migrants. Well, they too were creatures of rhythm and season, governed by a deep inner clock that demanded movement. Their pause on the rock was a shared moment in the vast planetary schedule. The keeper would leave out a shallow dish of fresh water for them, and take pleasure in seeing them dip and sip, their tiny bodies vibrating with life before continuing their immense journey. With the swallows came a change in the light itself. The quality of the sunshine shifted. It became lower, longer, and richer. The morning light slanted in through the lantern room windows at a sharp, dramatic angle, laying brilliant, geometric slabs of gold across the floor and up the curved wall, illuminating dust motes that danced like galaxies. The evening light, before the lamp was lit, was a painter's light, all warm, amber tones and long, deep purple shadows that stretched from every crevice of the rock. The Fresnel lens, in that final hour of daylight, would once again catch fire, but now the colors were deeper, more saturated, burnt oranges, royal purples, blood reds. The light show was more magnificent, as if the sun, knowing its time was waning, was putting on a final, spectacular performance. The keeper began a new personal ritual during these glorious evenings. After ensuring a lamp was prepared before lighting it, the keeper would take a small flat stone gathered from the beach years ago and place it on the eastern windowsill of the lantern room. As the sun made its final descent, its rays would strike the stone, heating it through the glass. After the lamp was lit, and the first sweep of the beam was confirmed true, the keeper would pick up the stone. It held, for a few minutes, the last of the sun's tangible warmth. The keeper would clasp it in a pocket, or simply hold it, a physical token of the day past, a companion for the first hour of the night watch. It was a small, wordless poetry. The garden's second act began. In the cleared beds, the keeper planted overwintering crops. Hardy spinach varieties, a row of broad beans, whose seeds were as large and dark as polished stones, and some winter onions, their sets like tiny, pungent marbles pushed. This planting was an act of profound faith. It was a contract with the future self, the self that would be here in the deep, dark months, needing the green taste of life. Covering the seeds with soil felt like tucking in a secret, a promise to the earth and to time. The maintenance of the light took on a new significance as the nights grew longer. The keeper began a thorough, systematic inventory of all spare parts. Wicks were counted and measured, their edges inspected for uniformity. Glass chimneys were examined for the faintest hairline crack that might fail under the winter's thermal stress. The stock of paraffin oil was calculated against the increasing burn time. This was not anxiety. It was the deepening of the relationship. It was knowing the needs of a partner so intimately that you could anticipate them before they were spoken. One day, a practical reminder of the coming season arrived with the post. It was not the tender vessel, but a passing trawler that left a waterproof mail pouch on the jetty. A courtesy of the sea. Inside, along with the usual service bulletins, was a new, heavier-duty oilskin coat, ordered months ago. The keeper unpacked it, feeling the stiff new canvas and smelling its treatment of linseed oil and wax. It was a shell for the coming gales. Hanging it next to the worn, soft coat of the previous years was a silent statement. The guard was changing. The first true autumn storm was not a violent breach, but a gradual, towering presence. It built for 2 days, a slow, relentless drop of the barometer, a sky that turned the color of a bruise, a sea that grew sullen and began to heave with a deep, resonant power that was felt through the rock itself. The keeper performed the final outdoor tasks, securing the last of the garden tools, double-checking the boathouse shutters, ensuring the rainwater barrels were full. The log entries grew more detailed, noting the falling pressure, the building swell, the direction of the advancing cloud. When the storm hit, it did so at high tide, under a moonless sky. It was a symphony of fury. The wind was not a moan, but a shriek that vibrated the very teeth. Rain came not in drops, but in solid horizontal sheets that hammered the lantern room glass. With such force it seemed the panes must bow inward. The sea was no longer a separate entity. It became the air, a flying soup of spray and foam that climbed the cliff face and lashed the gallery. The salt tasted sharp even behind glass. The keeper's vigil during this was the purest form of the watch. There was no question of sleep. The hour was a drum, the storm the beater. The keeper moved through the rounds inside, checking for any ingress of water. A single persistent trickle found its way under a lantern room window seal, caught in a placed bowl, listening for any hitch in the mechanism's steady click-clack over the roar. Climbing to the lantern room during the peak was a battle. Opening the iron door required bracing a shoulder against it. The noise was apocalyptic. Yet, inside, the flame burned straight and true, a tiny, defiant star in a universe of chaos. The beam, penetrating the maelstrom for perhaps only a few hundred yards before being swallowed, was a statement of existence. I am here. No, the order is here. The keeper stood, anchored by the solidity of the stone and the rhythm of the light, and felt not fear, but a fierce, exultant solidarity with the tower. They were enduring this together, and they were built for it. The storm blew itself out by dawn, leaving behind a world utterly spent and beautifully clean. The air was icily clear, scoured of all haze. The sea continued to boom, but it was the boom of exhaustion, not anger. The keeper, weary to the bone, but deeply calm, performed the morning extinguishing in a world washed in pale, exhausted light. The log entry was succinct. Storm, sea gale, severe, peak winds, approx. Lit 2A, no damage to apparatus. One minor ingress contained. The recovery was slow. For days afterwards, a deep physical fatigue permeated the keeper's being. It was the fatigue of a soldier after a great battle, where the body has been a conduit for immense energy. The routines were performed, but at a slower pace. The mind was quiet, processing the immense sensory bombardment. The keeper found solace in the most mundane tasks, meticulously cleaning the salt from every brass fitting, washing the single bowl that had caught the drip until it shone, slowly, methodically restacking the woodpile that had been diminished by the constant fire. It was in the days after this storm that the keeper experienced a moment of profound clarity. It was during the simple act of washing dishes. The water was warm, the soap smelled of plain tallow. The view from the sink window was of a calming sea under a high, mild sky. As the keeper's hands moved, washing, rinsing, drying, a thought arose, not as a verbal statement, but as a knowing that settled in the marrow. This is the whole of it, the storm and the calm. The polishing and the breaking, planting and the harvesting, the long light and the deep dark. There is no difference in their essence. They are all facets of the watch. I am not here to fight the storm or to enjoy the calm. I am to be present for it all, to turn the wheel of the care, regardless of what the world outside the glass is doing. This understanding was the final seamless integration. The keeper's identity dissolved completely into the function. There was no keeper, only the keeping. The autumn progressed, a gentle slide into the cradle of the year. The keeper's days became a beautiful slow dance of preparation and observation. The last of the migrating birds passed through, flocks of geese in wavering waves, their lonely honking cries echoing over the water, heading for milder marshes. The keeper would stop all activity to watch them pass, a salute to their ancient journey. The first frost returned, not as a surprise, but as an old acquaintance. It silvered the garden where the new spinach grew, making the leaves dark and glossy against the white-tipped soil. The keeper covered the beds at night with old sacks, a tender gesture to the struggling green. And through it all, the light turned. Its beam was the constant heartbeat in the chest of the approaching winter. The keeper's life had become indistinguishable from that pulse. The story had reached its silent, unwavering climax. It was not an ending, but a state of perfect, perpetual balance. The wind might rise, the sea might sleep, the garden might grow or rest, The logbook pages would fill, but the essence, the watchful, tender, utterly present attention, would remain as fixed and as necessary as the light itself. For as long as the stone stood and the sea rolled, and in that truth there was a completion so deep, it felt like the beginning of something eternal. So the logbook closes for now. The keeper's hand rests. The flame burns on, automated and eternal. But the human part of the watch, the noticing, the polishing, the quiet attendance, retires to the alcove, to a well-earned rest in the rhythm it has helped to maintain. And you, dear listener, your watch is also complete. You have held vigil with me through the turning of seasons on this lonely rock. You have felt the sting of the winter frost and the gentle breath of the summer dawn, all from the safety of your own space. That is the gift of this channel, a shared, silent journey to places of profound peace, where nothing happens, and that is everything. As you begin to drift back to your own room, to the feeling of your own blankets, I want to thank you for spending this time here. In a world that never stops shouting, you chose to listen to a whisper. You chose a slow story. That is a rare and beautiful thing. If this space has been a refuge for you, if the rhythms of the Keeper's Day have helped to quiet the rhythms of your own mind, then you are always welcome back. Subscribing to the channel is like leaving a marker on your map, a way to easily find your way back to this calm harbor whenever you need it. By subscribing, you also tell the wider world that there is value in stillness, and you help others lost in their own noisy seas find their way to this shore. But before you go, let me leave you with one last image from the Keeper's world. It is an image not of doing, but of being. It is the Keeper, not polishing or writing, but simply sitting on the granite steps in the late afternoon sun, a cup of tea cooling beside them, watching a single gull hang, motionless in the updraft. There is no thought in their mind of past or future. There is only the sun on the skin, the taste of the air, the silent, magnificent fact of existence. That is the final gift of this story. Not a plot to remember, but a state of being to borrow. A mission slip to simply be, without agenda, without worry, if only for a few moments. So, as the sound of these waves fades, and my voice leaves you, carry that permission with you. You have been still. You have been quiet. You have kept a gentle watch. And now, it is time for you to rest. Thank you for listening. Sleep deeply and well.